for your aura to leave your body after death. And then he measured where the electric field of your ghost goes after death, which is, by the way, the place of compression called fractal or sacred space. Kind of the Castaneda place of power defined electrically. But even prior to that work, you had the Heinrich Kluwe form constants, where large numbers of near-death experiencers reported on the sequence of the geometry of their vision during death. And it turns out lattice cobweb tunnel spiral to be a sequence of fold symmetry operations based on the sequence's symmetry folding your own DNA. Basically, you're enacting the operations of braiding in order to allow your aura, your electric field, to compress. And that gives you the ability to propagate the charge, which is called memory through death. So there is a map to dying, just like I'll follow a map to Paris tomorrow. And that map is well known, it's teachable, and your ability to navigate that realm, even suggested by the Tibetan Book of the Dead or the Voynich manuscript, is proportional to the amount of coherence in the aura you take with you at death. So an electrical engineer should inform you of the best place and mechanism of death. And obviously, the hospital is the worst possible place because it's opposite to fractal and the electrosmog.
So does that mean that if we die in a hospital, that our memory are lost and not absorbed into the field, if you will?
Well, I mean, obviously there are some people that are coherent enough to be able to handle some of that, I suppose, but clearly it's opposite to ideal. Our Anunnaki ancestors would go to something like the bed at Machu Picchu, which is profoundly electrically fractal, which is precisely the correct place to die, because from there your charge is able to propagate. And that is the definition of successful death, because you will find your memory. It's very simple. If you can lucid dream, you got a good shot at death.
Right.
And the physics of lucid dreaming is very teachable.
And again, is that something that we can, that you've been working on in regards to external devices and how you can better enable yourself to lucid dream, or is this an internal thing again? Or
Well, years ago we were working with Terry Patton. You click on toolsforexploration.com and you order a lucid dreaming kit, and you get a little device that senses rapid eye movement and will do partial awakening. But at a much deeper level, preparing yourself to lucid dream starts with getting, yoga, charged dense food, and a magnetic map of your bed so that you're able to get your aura propagating.
What is
one of the most important things you can do for yourself is make a magnetic map of your bed.
Okay, and how do people do that then?
Well, having a bit of dowsing skill is survival related. That's for starters, because if you can't feel a magnetic line, you can't feel.
Right.
Once you begin to feel a few magnetic lines, and you could get help on this, then you get the idea that your aura is at its most susceptible during sleep and death. And so if your bed is not located with reasonable fractality, you're in trouble.
And you mentioned charged dense food as well. Is there any examples you can give people?
Our courses we start out with this whole story. It's called Implosion, Secret Science of Ecstasy and Immortality, which is my fourth book. It's in about 5 languages. It's on the website. And the first half of the book is for teenagers, like you were willing to risk death in order to get bliss. And guess what? You were correct. It's worth risking your life to get, because without it, you don't get an immune system and you don't survive death because you don't acquire enough charge. But once you get motivated to see that that's the only way to get immortal, then there's a homework assignment. And the homework assignment is the hygiene. And the hygiene is called a charge acquiring lifestyle. And that's based on diet, yoga, and environment largely. And yes, in the dietary area, we teach that charge dense food, life force in food, and you all know what that is. It means live food. About 50 to 80% of your diet needs to be live enzyme food, because the heat that killed the enzyme killed the life force. And digestion is implosion by definition. So then you learn that you should avoid eating angry DNA, because you're eating DNA whose ability to share its charge has been destroyed. Monocultured wheat, corn, and soy are examples of angry DNA. The DNA in wheat, corn, and soy, by millennia of monoculture, is angry enough to cause mucus and destroy your immune system. So you need DNA that's experienced genetic diversity. That will tell you if that DNA is going to be able to feed your aura. Fa'atun, feed the aura, fatten. So, there's a whole bunch of stories about diet, and you know most of those stories. But it boils down to being able to have a charged, dense diet.
Yes.
And, high-quality protein is critical and hard to find, actually. How do you get a happy chicken? That sort of question.
Okay, that's interesting. In regards to seeds again, I just want to wing this by as well, because I'm thinking of, we have all you know the stories as well, what's going on and what's happening right now in regards to how the genetic diversity in many seeds is being taken away, and this is even being, stored up here in close to the North Pole, up in Svalbard. The global seed vault that they're building right there. There they have all the good seeds right now with all the genetic diversity, and what we're being offered right now is the Monsanto approved genetic seeds, and
I firmly believe the Monsanto approach should be illegal because it's against the laws of nature.
Yeah.
But what Monsanto needs to know, and I don't think they're evil, I just think they're stupid, is that the ability to self-organize at the core of DNA depends precisely on fractality, which is identical with genetic diversity. That fundamental truth should be the end of Monsanto as a company in the present form.
Well, I guess that's where we differ a little bit. Then I actually do consider them to be evil, and even consciously of what they're doing, because the way that they're expanding, and it's.
Maybe we shouldn't argue about that, whether they're evil or stupid.
Sure.
Maybe
absolutely.
That's a trivial question. And we don't want to condemn anybody. I would prefer to believe that they're stupid, but whatever.
Whatever. Well, sure. In any regards, the fruit of what they're doing is equally stupid and wrong at this point. So that's something we can agree with.
That gets into a much bigger picture, which is the history and tradition of loss of genetic diversity, which came right from Alpha Draconis, the Draco Anunnaki story. So, that's a galactic historical question.
Well, exactly, but that's interesting. Do you consider that the technology, if you will, and the science and knowledge of what the things that you were talking about today, that's been passed down to us from these other civilizations?
Well, the essential conflict in the pre-Anunnaki, which we now know came from Alpha Draconis and the Pleiades, and I do recommend Anton Park's work, The Chronicles of Kirku, to see the history of Enki and the Draco. But in the classic, traditional, conservative draconian culture, what you might be called Nephilim, meaning the fallen, loss of ability to implode DNA, in that culture, any DNA that changed was defined as defective. And that's the tragedy, because that culture produced the fallen seraphim, Gabriel, who narrated the origin of Christianity. Mormons and the Muslim came from the same source, Gabriel, who was conservative seraphim genetic politics. And that was a genetic politics that was profoundly mistaken, to believe that you could not set DNA free, when in fact the opposite is necessary.
There are a few researchers who suggest even that human beings are genetically engineered by other people from other worlds. Do you think that that's the case, or are we in a perfect accordance with nature and the creation of the universe in that sense?
The galactic core cultures, something called the Kadistu, which were some of the original genetic planners behind the seraphim, from which we get the word caduceus, which is the symbol of Hermes, who was the sort of grandson of and symbol of DNA and doctors, the caduceus, which is called phase conjugation in physics. So that lineage from the Kadistu side of the family recognized the need for genetic diversity early on, which is why they established Earth as a kind of genetic library from which all these cultures could draw. Unfortunately, you don't qualify to have a library card unless you know what DNA is for, and current genetic engineers don't.
Right.
DNA is designed to make the gravity to hold stars together.
And now when we are beginning to tamper with this, now when we are coming into this age, where do you see that that's going? Is it going to, do you think we're going to create monsters in the laboratory that totally is going to, run amok on the surface? Or where is this going in what you can see? Will this create disease in some kind, or could we wipe us out, if I phrase it like that, if we tamper with this too much?
Yeah, loss of genetic freedom is directly related to how Atlantis sank. It's the old story. But the funny part of this story, I like to tell it, is called the Golden One story by Reiki Rakup. He says, the Anunnaki Draco, they went 300 years into our future, and they saw all these stars blowing up, and they went backwards in time to figure out when stars started blowing up so much, and they realized it was when we started genetic engineering here.
Mm-hmm.
DNA gets dizzy and gravity gets dizzy. And so they went backwards in time and settled in Sumeria, and they were called the Anunnaki. They did Groundhog Day. So the real issue here is you keep trying to get it till you get it right. It's just that in the same way your kids don't get smart unless you set them free, your DNA has the same problem.
That's a good point. That's very, very interesting. And this pretty much you take as a theory, or is this fact to you at this point? You know that this has happened in your own worldview, so to speak, in regards to the Anunnaki and all this stuff, of course.
I think the history story is very optional. I mean, I don't think it's important whether people agree with me on the history story. I think the history story, and I do recommend Anton Parks. I think he's much better than Sumerian or Sitchin. But
right.
The history story of Enki, in my view, is a wonderful, much better than Star Wars story. But even the reason for telling the story is only to get you interested in the principles to do the homework.
Right.
The principles is the physics of fractality and genetic diversity, and the homework is the hygiene to have bliss. The history story is just a way to get the kids motivated. History is a short nightmare that'd be well to wake up from.
Before we round things up here for this first hour, Dan, and continue talking more here in our member section, why don't you mention your website again, and primarily mention where people can go in order to find more of your videos and books, and so that they can gain more material of what it is that you're producing, Dan.
Yes. In the main index at goldenmean.info, you'll see the section on the courses and the online video library, on the books. There's also 5 language links there, and the entire index in date sequence. It's one of the world's largest private websites, certainly the world's largest private video library. We get 1 million hits a month. It's the central index for the whole thing. Is right there at goldenmean.info.
Very good. So we're talking with Dan Winter. The website is goldenmean.info. We're going to take a short break here, and we're going to return and talk more in the members section. But thank you very much for this segment, Dan. Stay with us, and we will be right back.
Thanks for caring.
Thank you for listening to our first segment with Dan Winter. Join us in our member section for much more. We are going to talk about architecture, houses, building materials, straw bale houses, electrosmog, Wi-Fi, and cell phone signals. We're also going to talk about clothing and certain kinds of jewelry with metals and iron in them. We are also going to talk about the sun, the eye of the sun, and the sun as the true stargate, if you will, as a jumping point. We're going to talk about organic crafts, different type of vehicles made of DNA. Very, very interesting. And the hollow nature of the moon, and the idea that it's actually an artificial object that has been towed here by another civilization. We'll also talk about brainwaves, some of the experiments at the Monroe Institute, astral parasites, ectoplasm, and much, much more. So join us for an interesting continuation in our member section. Head on over to our website, redicecreations.com, to find out how to tune in. My thanks to Fredrik behind the controls, and to you for listening. We'll tune into some music, and then we'll be back with more.
Everything that keeps them together is falling apart. I got this